As we enter 2026, the market is doing the one thing that scares sensible investors more than a crash. It's going up. The S&P 500 is hovering near fresh all-time highs, and your brain is screaming one command: stop. Don't be the person who buys the top. Because buying at the highest price in history feels like financial suicide. You picture yourself investing today and waking up tomorrow to a red candle and instant regret. So you do what feels smart. You wait. You sit in cash. You tell yourself you'll buy after a pullback, 5% cheaper, 10% cheaper after the inevitable crash. And here's the contrarian truth. That feeling of safety you get from waiting is a hallucination. Waiting for the dip sounds prudent, but it's often the most expensive move an investor makes because the market doesn't punish you for being wrong about next month. It punishes you for being absent from compounding. So in this video, we're not doing vibes. We're doing a forensic breakdown. We're going to answer 3 questions with real numbers. What happens if you buy at the worst possible moment, right before a historic collapse? Why do all-time highs tend to keep happening once they start? What are you really buying in today's index? And what risks are hiding inside diversification? By the end, you won't just have an opinion on buy now or wait. You'll have a simple, math-backed blueprint for how to deploy capital when markets feel too high to touch. Let's start with the only thing that matters: math. If you have cash today, you really have 3 options. Option A, invest it now, lump sum. Option B, hold it, waiting for a better price. Option C, invest gradually, dollar cost averaging, or DCA. Most people assume option B is smart and option C is safe. But markets don't reward safe feelings, they reward exposure. So let's simulate the nightmare scenario, buying right before the global financial crisis. It's late 2007. The market feels strong. You invest $100,000 into a broad S&P 500 ETF like SPY, and you commit to one rule. You do not sell, you reinvest dividends. Then 2008 hits and the market drops hard. Your portfolio gets shredded. Emotionally, it feels like you made the dumbest decision of your life. But if you simply held through the chaos, that worst timing in a generation investment doesn't end as a tragedy. By the end of 2025, that same $100,000 would be worth roughly $650,000. You lived through 2008, you lived through 2020, you lived through 2022, and you still ended up with about 6.5 times your money, despite buying at the top. That's the first lesson. Even terrible timing is survivable if your horizon is long and your behavior is disciplined. Now, here's an even more uncomfortable example. What if you bought earlier when markets felt high and then still got hit by the crash? If you invested $100,000 at the end of 2005 and simply held through everything with dividends reinvested, by late 2025, you'd be sitting on roughly $790,000 to $800,000. That includes taking the full 2008 drawdown straight to the face. So the market's message is consistent. Your entry point matters far less than your time in the market and your ability to not self-destruct during drawdowns. Now, the second lesson, the one people hate, is about option B, waiting. When you wait for safety, you pay an invisible cost: lost compounding. Stocks are not a coin flip. Over long periods, they drift upward because earnings and productivity grow. So every day you sit in cash, you're betting you can time a better entry and that the market will hand it to you quickly. Sometimes it does, often it doesn't. And there's a second trap hiding here. People confuse DCA with not being invested. True DCA is a plan where you keep buying regardless of headlines. It's consistent contributions that keep you in the game. Waiting for a dip is not DCA. Waiting is inactivity. And inactivity is dangerous because markets tend to deliver a disproportionate share of their long-term return in a surprisingly small number of days. Miss enough of those big up days, and your long-term result gets chopped down hard. That's why research from Vanguard has repeatedly found that investing a lump sum tends to beat cost averaging most of the time, roughly 2/3 of the time, because of opportunity cost. When you delay, you give up the market's long-run risk premium. So where does DCA fit? DCA is not a return maximizing strategy. It's an anxiety management strategy. And that's not an insult. If DCA is what keeps you invested during scary markets, it's a win. But be honest about what you're buying. You're paying an insurance premium in the form of lower expected returns. So here's the verdict in one sentence. Lump sum usually wins on math. DCA can win on psychology, and waiting for the dip is the worst of both worlds because it feels safe while your money sits outside compounding. Most people treat an all-time high like the summit of a mountain. We're at the top. The only direction is down. That's the trap. In markets, all-time highs are not peaks. They are milestones. Since 1950, the S&P 500 has set new all-time highs on roughly 6.7% of trading days, about 1 day out of every 15. Another way to frame it, the market has ended a month at an all-time high more than 1/4 of the time over the post-1950 era. So if your rule is, I don't buy at highs, your rule is really, I avoid investing during one of the market's most common states. Here's the next uncomfortable truth. All-time highs tend to cluster. Once the market breaks into a new high, it often keeps doing it because strong earnings, improving liquidity, and positive sentiment create momentum. Historically, the average 12-month return after an all-time high has been better than the average 12-month return after a random day, around 10.3% versus about 8.6% in one long-run analysis. That doesn't mean buying at a high guarantees a good year. It means high is not automatically danger. Now zoom into where we are today. In late 2025 and heading into early 2026, the Federal Reserve has shifted toward easing, with the most recent rate decision reinforcing that the era of higher for longer is not guaranteed. Whether you love the Fed or hate it, you need to understand the mechanism. When rates fall, future cash flows are discounted less aggressively, and the relative attractiveness of cash starts to fade. That matters because a lot of investors have been hiding in cash-like instruments and money markets. When rates start moving down, that safe yield shrinks, and cash starts looking less safe compared to assets that compound. So here's the classic wait for the dip trap. You refuse to buy at 6,900, waiting for a 5% pullback. But the market rallies first, then pulls back later, and your dip happens at a price higher than the level you were too scared to touch. Waiting wasn't a strategy, it was hope. Now, what are you buying when you buy a broad market ETF at these levels? In 2025, the S&P 500 is not 500 equal companies. It's a market cap weighted index. The biggest companies dominate your outcome, and the Magnificent Seven, Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Tesla, represent roughly 1/3 of the S&P 500 by weight as we head into early 2026. So yes, the S&P 500 holds 500 companies, but your returns are heavily driven by a handful. That's not automatically bad, it's just real. The trade-off is simple. Concentration boosts returns when leadership is strong. Concentration amplifies drawdowns when leadership breaks. Bears say, this is 2000 again. That comparison is lazy. In 2000, many leaders had weak business models and weak earnings. In 2025, the mega-cap leaders are cash flow machines with global moats, and AI is a real productivity lever, not just a story. That's why the market pays a premium. But high quality does not mean low risk. As we head into early 2026, the S&P 500 is priced above long-term average valuation levels, which means the market is priced for continued execution. Now let's talk about the actual ETF wrapper for a second, because it matters more than people think. SPY is the most famous S&P 500 ETF, but it's built as a unit investment trust, a structure from the early 1990s. That structure comes with trade-offs. For example, it forgoes securities lending, and long-term investors often prefer a cheaper modern ETF like VOO or IVV because fees compound too. So here's a practical rule. If you're a long-term investor, pick the lowest cost, low friction tool. If you're a trader, SPY's liquidity and options market can matter. Either way, don't confuse the wrapper with the engine. The real engine is the index, and the index today is top-heavy. So how do you manage that without running to cash? You diversify intentionally inside equities. Pair market cap weighting with an equal weight ETF like RSP if concentration bothers you. Add global diversification with something like VT if single country risk bothers you. That's how you manage concentration risk like an adult. Structure, not avoidance. Here's the honest truth. There will be another crash. The market will drop, headlines will scream, and fear will feel rational. The question is not, will volatility happen? It will. The question is, do you have a plan that keeps you invested through it? Historically, bear markets are shorter than bull markets. One long-run data set puts the average bear market around 1 year and 3 months, while the average bull market is closer to 6 years and 10 months. So the long-run outcome is dominated by compounding, not by drawdowns. Drawdowns are not a bug. They are the price of admission for equity returns. And the only way drawdowns permanently destroy you is if you combine them with panic selling. That's why I'll wait for the crash and then buy is mostly a fantasy. In real life, people don't buy crashes. They freeze. They demand more confirmation. They wait for one more leg down. Then the market rips higher and they're still in cash. Here's another hard truth. Over very long horizons, the market's track record is brutally one-sided. In US stock market history, rolling 20-year periods have been overwhelmingly positive. The longer you stretch your time horizon, the more timing risk turns into behavior risk. So if your horizon is 10 years or more, today's record high is very likely to look like a discount in hindsight. Let's finish with a plan you can actually execute. If your horizon is 10 years or more, stop trying to time the next 10 weeks. Be an owner, not a timer. If you have a lump sum and you can tolerate volatility, deploy it. Not because you can predict next month, because odds favor exposure over delay. If you have a lump sum and you can't tolerate volatility, use a modified DCA. Invest 50% today, then invest the remaining 50% in equal chunks over the next 6 to 12 months. Is it perfectly optimal? No. Is it a plan you can stick to? For most people, yes. If your fear is concentration, adjust structure. Don't hide in cash. Pair market cap with equal weight or add global exposure. And then the most important step, automate it. If you decide every month whether you feel safe, you'll eventually make one emotional decision that wrecks years of progress. Consistency beats cleverness. So buy now or wait until late 2026. If your horizon is long, the evidence supports buying and staying invested. Not because markets can't fall, but because fear of falling is usually more damaging than the fall itself. Here's the fortune cookie. The market doesn't punish you for buying high, it punishes you for not buying at all. If you want more videos that replace fear with math, subscribe, because the goal isn't to feel safe today. The goal is to build wealth over time.